third day of the ARIJ 16th Annual Forum here in Jordan. Welcome, everyone. In this session that we feel is one of the most important ones, and you are the ones who to decide, actually, since the topic of this session is the hot topic. Is the Western coverage alienating the Global South over Gaza 2023? We will be checking into Western media outlets and their coverage of the ongoing events in the Gaza Strip up to this minute, war, destruction, and genocide. It's a coverage that raises a number of questions about the bias and the hypocrisy and its impact. It's on the long run and the short term, its impact on the cross-border collaboration and the trust and confidence. I would like to welcome my guests, Dr. Yasmin Dabbous, Dr. Zahira Harb, Mr. Michael Johnson, and Ms. Wafa Abdurrahman. Good evening, everyone. I would start with you, Dr. Yasmin. The question is, after monitoring the coverage of the Western media outlets, what are the conclusions through this monitoring up to this date regarding the events taking place in the Gaza Strip? Hello, everyone. Firas, when you first look at the coverage in general, you would feel the bias. However, I want to go more into details in a more accurate manner. I would start with naming things, which is such a sensitive thing, yet as a point, a strength, because through which we can understand the events. The events in Gaza is a war, is an Israel-Hamas war. This is the title that I documented on all the English, German, French headlines, even on Wikipedia. What does this mean if we try to analyze it? War. The word war is a term of a two-way street. It's not the truth that it's more than 1 month, one place is being shelled. The Israel-Hamas idea, as opposed to Israel-Palestine or Israel-Gaza, it's a way to refuse the name Palestine as a state. This only reflects, of course, from the Western perspective, it reflects the principle of empire and pirates. This is an Israeli justification that our war, they justify that their war is against Hamas as opposed to civilians, claiming that Hamas uses civilians as human shields. When it's far from being objective, it's merely an implementation of a certain political agenda. I've made a comparison of the titles or headlines on the Western media, Europe, USA, Canada, between October 7th and October 17. On October 7, the operation in Israel, I have circled the name Hamas, as you see on the you see all the titles. They use the word attack or assault, which means I was attacked intentionally. Okay, Hamas did its own responsibility, but how would you explain the disparity of coverage between October 7 and 17? The October 17, the day they targeted Al Ahli Hospital. You would find no title, no actor. Israel is mentioned only 3 times within the framework of denying the responsibility. Israel denies. Using the passive voice makes you feel that the world is separate or segmented. There is no, you won't find the word attack or assault, which is the meaning of the harm. You have blast, you have exploding, as if the hospital exploded by itself or by a gas canister. I was really furious about the BBC, as you see on the headline, over 300 people killed in Gaza hospital, as if the 300 people died from malpractice, from certain surgeries, or maybe physical doctor mistake. This is a shame compared to the coverage of October 7. I want to conclude with this picture from because it expresses this kind of difference during this crisis. This balance, this is unbalanced balance. On one hand, you have on the left hand, you see Gaza. You don't see any human beings, no story, nothing that you can feel with the streets of Gaza. Don't look like the streets of Paris or any European streets. On the other side, you have Tel Aviv. You have the money. The woman who has her back to us. We can tell that she's middle aged. She's her head is red, and she's kind of stressed about the pictures of the hundreds of hostages or captives, and you can tell there are kids, there are white faces. So this is the lack of balance, the unbalanced balance. So this is unbalanced balance. This is the conclusion of what you have done, Dr. Yasmin. You probably have seen that, and everybody, of course, has their own opinion. Dr. Zahira, regarding the media, the British media outlets. Actually, there will be time given for questions, so let's. I know that Dr. Zahira is a very trustworthy person, but I'm sure there are many questions regarding the British media coverage. You have tracked the events since October 7 until today. What are the main comments or input that you can share? Thank you, Firas. To answer the question that our colleague was enthusiastic to ask, Dr. Yasmin teaches at AAU in Beirut University, Media and Communication, and I teach Press and Communication at the London City University. First, in the beginning of the coverage, the basic feeling was a disappointment, a professional disappointment, a big one, regarding the way the coverage is taking place. I think this disappointment in the profession was more on the social media. So to answer the question that this session is trying to address, did the southern part of the world lost its confidence in the Western coverage? I believe, and it's not scientifically based, but it's just a result of an accurate tracking of the social media. Yes, I think it has lost the trust and lost the confidence, basically because it was seeing coverage of a team, a failure of humanizing this team as opposed to highlighting the humanization of another team. I believe this is, we call this in English, I'm trying to, I don't know if this is, I can't confirm if this is based on knowledge or not, intentional or unintentional, but there has been a dehumanization of the Palestinians in general. And after that, we have seen the dehumanization of the Arab, of a Muslim also. In the British media, I would add that I can't generalize. There's a few number of voices playing and playing its professional role in this kind or in this type of or these type of events. The disappointment in this profession was the result of the repetition by the Western media and the global media, that they always try to teach us as journalists in the southern part of the world, what does professionalism mean in journalism. Two basic things regarding the headlines that such as how to be balanced and how to keep or maintain your impartial, how to maintain your impartiality. The thing that appeared in the coverage, how to be balanced or how to be impartial, how to give space for one side, and this side expresses its own opinion freely and openly and without accountability. On the other hand, you have a very narrow room for the other side or the other party, and when you give space to this party, you would not give them the opportunity to express themselves, because you're always challenging their own narrative. You're always trying to tell them that your credibility is on the edge. Every time you are being hosted, or uh, I'm talking here particularly about the TV coverage. When they host people, they have first to get an Israeli approval about the narrative and a challenge a challenge to the Palestinian narrative, which is something very clear. How would the equation of impartiality be in balance with a narrative, or the Israeli narrative, when you adopt the Israeli narrative that says good contradicts bad? As a media platform, the journalists would be responsible, but in some places you would see that journalists if you speak about the editors or the editing part that makes the content of the news or of the newspaper, it would let you know that I adopted this idea of the bad and good. And the bad is not only about one party. The bad can have an impact or can affect an entire population. So how can we say that professionalism about impartiality be achieved in this topic? Let me share one example, an example that I had before I came to this session. I heard an interview on a local British radio. The British journalist was asking a Palestinian journalist, asking a Palestinian, if you have to choose between being in Gaza, staying in Gaza, in this hell, or to go to Sinai to be safer, you and your kids, which one would you choose? Even the question by itself has some sort of dehumanization, as well as why does this person have to choose? Why, with all these details that sometimes they tell us that you're going into in-depth details, you shouldn't. But the details in this particular topic are very important. I believe just to continue this cycle of this conversation or discussion, these details makes you lose confidentiality and trust in this.
This is it. This is it. That's how the Global South have lost trust in the credible coverage of what's happening in Gaza. And Michael, if we ask you, why is this happening? Why has it happened? Why it's still happening? What do you think? And through your follow-up in where you live, where you follow up the media mainstream.
Yeah, thank you for the question and thank you for your interventions. I come from Denmark. I'm not a media scholar. I work in IMS, and where we're actually trying to support independent media, professional, ethical journalism in the region. And of course, in our office, we have had quite a lot of conversations around what the heck is going on with our media. Maybe we should have a Europe program, Maybe we should actually try to educate journalists in the West, and in my own country in particular, because a lot of the examples that you're coming with, it's the same. It's the same narrative. It's basically a global narrative. And of course, now we have the very broad Western media, and you have exceptions for sure. But maybe I'll share a few examples from the Danish context that is quite striking. And I have to say, whether we see TV or even the mainstream legacy media, the narrative is basically the same. So one example, which is, for me, it's striking, and maybe it's just related to Palestine in the sense that it's about the solidarity for Palestine. So you gave examples of how Western media describes the war, but even the way they describe the solidarity for Palestine in the streets and in universities, in unions, everywhere, it's not covered. In my country, we have actually had since week 1, demonstrations from Monday to Friday. For me, it's the best project of actually integration that I have ever seen in Denmark, because it's not just Palestinians, it's not just Arabs. 30-40% are actually Danes coming to the street every night from 5 to 8. Speeches that are so clear that I can't remember, and I think it's very important actually to stress it, because the Palestinians learned lessons. That kind of cross or lack of distinction between Jews and Zionism and occupation that occurred 10 years ago is not in existence. Every speech is very clear. This is about occupation. This is about the Zionist way of doing things. We don't mind Jews. We can co-live and cooperate with Jews, but it's the aggression, it's the occupation that is the core of the matter. So I think that message in and by itself is an extremely important message, and maybe that's why it's not really conveyed broader. So point being with the demonstrations, it's 3,000, 5,000, 7,000, sometimes on Sundays 25. 10 days ago it was 65,000. There's not been one note. That's the whole point. There's not been one note in the papers. They don't cover it. It's apparently uninteresting. It never happened for 20 years, and it's not news. Some of the demonstrations, we go to the Danish national broadcast. We 10,000 people right in front of the door. They don't even stick out a microphone to tell their audience that there are actually people out there who are trying to hold them accountable, and they don't care. They have now been forced to come up with defense in other media. Maybe that was an editorial mistake and so forth. But I don't think it's an editorial mistake. They just want to ignore it, because do you have a small vigil for the hostages? There would be 200 people showing up. You will have 7 minutes prime time. So it's structural. And this leads me to why. What is it? And again, we have had like this, 7 October is something new, no, it's not. It's just a continuation of history. And this also what we see in the Western press, it's just a continuation of history. We have had so many crises, not only in Palestine, but the whole Middle East. And I presume and I expect that every Arab journalist, every Arab intellectual in this room are gobsmacked of the coverage that has been on any event in that region. Who is it that is covering it? For Palestine, it's been very clear for decades. Every newspaper or every TV station, insofar they have a bit of funds, they would either have a freelancer who's closely attached, but that person happened to live, because that's the way the newsroom operates. That person is already living in Tel Aviv. So that person comes with a personal history, with a personal approach to the conflict, with a core of conceptual ideas, networks of sources that are being applied. And it happened that all of them have the same story. So it's one narrative. In my country is small. So far, I've always said, I don't mind if the Zionists covering this, as long as we have 5 Palestinians doing the same. So we get counter-narratives. So people can actually get different ideas and vocabularies around it and make up their own mind. But we only get the one narrative. And I think it's, there's an element of laziness. There's probably an element of economics in it, because they don't have the money to actually send out the right people. So they do, okay, there's a journalist, he or she is Danish, already in Tel Aviv, they can cover it. Malish, we don't care about the narrative. Then you come home to the editorial room in Copenhagen, and it could be in London. I don't know. Sometimes I talk to really my colleagues who are journalists, who worked in the newsrooms. Say, what is it? Is there a plan? Do you have a plan? Say, no, of course we don't have a plan. So what is it? Are you lazy? Are you stupid? And they cannot really explain why it is. But there is an element of laziness into it, because it's the easiest thing. And of course, also in the concrete case right now in the Gaza Strip, I fully agree. This about the dehumanization. Palestinians are becoming figures. You show it very well. The right picture. It's a person. It's sorrow. It's it's another explosion in the Middle East. This is a war-torn area. We don't even know who bombed. Huh?
No.
So it's so structural, and I don't know how we get away with it, but I think maybe Jasmine will have ideas as how we can actually have more substantial kind of evidence and proof of it, and it's about building up counter narrative, and I think actually they lost it. And again, now we talk about the legacy media, but nobody cares about it, and that's the whole thing. This is why everybody's shitting their pants, sorry for my language here, because social media is actually showing it. And nobody who is below 35 would actually even care to read the newspapers. So we are in a completely, so we can talk a lot about that, but you know they have lost it.
نعم. إذا الموضوع بحاجة يعني ليس بحاجة يعني الإجابة على السؤال.
The question is now like it's a question of is there trust or is there no trust? What conclusions do we get to? Mr. Wafa Abdurrahman, you come from Palestine and you are in constant touch with female journalists in the field in Gaza, in the Gaza Strip. If we've posed the question to you, to those female journalists in the Gaza Strip, what would their answer be? Is there still trust in this coverage? And we teach them about the professional standards, best practices, ethical terms, and balanced coverage. What do you say? Thank you. There is something about this legacy or leisure about this question. Up till now, we could not get the chance to ask them how do they perceive the Western coverage for this cleansing that is taking place in Gaza nowadays. For instance, there's a survey that was done by Palestiniyat institution and it included 173 female journalists in Gaza. 87% of these female journalists have left their homes and they are displaced now. And that was 2 days prior to the new displacement that have taken place yesterday. And I know if we go back to them again, I know it will be 95% of those journalists. That there are no TVs, no TV, no communication, and no internet, no electricity. So it's for them to see how does the Western media cover the bloodshedding that takes place every day. So I don't know if this are we really displacing. So is this like a denial question or not? I work in Gaza. We have a club for media journalists. So we work with 400 with them. I'm from Gaza. I come from Gaza. I still have my mom, my siblings. They still live in the Gaza Strip. And I don't dare to pose this question to them. How do you see this coverage? You know why? Because they know the answer from the continuation of this genocide, of this ethnic cleansing. If there was a balance, an equitable coverage, they would answer it clearly. The other topic regarding trust, I believe that Gazans, especially Gazans, I'm talking about Gazans specifically and not all Palestinians. Please allow me to be more Gazans in this minute rather than only Palestinian, because Gazans have believed that 17 years of this open air jail, of this blood that wasn't colored red, wasn't enough to convey the story and to say that there is this people who are suffering and that the story did not start on the 7th of October. Regretfully, we have let them down all. We have let Gaza down. We've let all journalists in the Gaza Strip down when we were not able. We, wherever we are existing comfortably, when their voice has vanished and an image was gone and we could not lend a hand. And as I said, they would tell us what they think of this media coverage, Western media coverage, from what's still happening and going on. So it's not about the editorial rooms. Who holds those journalists accountable who were complicit with the occupation against Gaza? I have to share with you two quick experiences, one with a British TV, and it was just that. The moment I said exchange of prisoners, I don't know what happened. The anchor became so furious, and he said, "How can you make them equal? Like between is rape prisoners at Hamas?" He didn't even give me the chance to continue because I should have called them hostages, and he wanted me to condemn Hamas and condemn it that it's a terrorist party. Was he really? He wanted to drive me to do so. That was one. Second, that we wanted to hold this meeting, to this interview, but we're asking you not to use the word cleansing, ethnic cleansing. And I thought for a minute, and then the first thing I thought of, I said, you are exactly telling me as if I'm raped, but don't use the word rape, just say harassment. That's exactly the equivalent correlation. So I felt so embarrassed. I felt so furious. I felt there's ethnic cleansing, there's genocide, and they didn't want me to use these two terms. The other thing is about the stories of journalists, and since we're now in this forum, and it's the voice of journalists and the Western media coverage. How much did we see of such coverage, other than the number of journalists that were killed? How many stories have we seen in the Western media about the humanitarian side of those journalists? I know a journalist, photographer, which we have not seen even in the Arab media, just to be fair, that the threats that they receive, we have monitored and we've seen that they are targeted, both females and men. And if they weren't targeted personally, their families would be targeted. They would be bombed. They would be displaced. They would be killed. And so families whose children work as journalists ask them not to visit the family. And that very journalist that I'm talking about, she's divorced, and she had to go to a new house, and the condition her mom had set, she told her, you cannot come, you cannot visit your children, except, I want you all to hear the story. She told her daughter, you can meet your children only at the hospital. You cannot visit them at home. These are stories that should be told. I, as a Gazan, as a media person, I should ask this. Can I trust? I don't know about my trust in the Arab media, Arabic media. I don't know. I cannot raise the slogan that we have. We are living the same case, the same concern, and the same case. I will conclude here, and I just say, I don't want to think of the next day after this genocide finishes. I don't want to think of how am I going to talk to those or approach those journalists and tell them, like, you should do fact checking. And remember, we are working on gender sensitive reporting, gender balance, and we have to remember the human rights reporting. Well, thinking of not having trust is not only in the Western media and what it represents. There's this anger and about all this rage about those human rights organizations and those claims of human rights and professionalism and balance in coverage. Imagine that you tell those who are being killed and displaced and being killed on camera that we tell them, do you trust this coverage or not?
شكرا
Thank you.
وفاء. إذا أسئلة جوهرية لابد من
Substantial questions we need to ask during and after the event. We need to get things straightforward. We need to reconsider things or that is happening. Let's go back to the beginning or the start question. Dr. Yasmin, what do you think everything that is happening in terms of the Western coverage of the events in the Gaza Strip? And you have talked about some points in terms of the titles, terms, the terminology. How would a person would be looked at as a human and another person be dehumanized elsewhere? I think it did not start only now. It started since the 18th century, ever since shooting or maybe giving or reflecting an image of the East as something that exists or doesn't exist. We can read more about that and know more, but it started with people in the films produced by Hollywood, whether with or without political will. The films used to represent Arabs as bad, as abductors, as rapists, rapists who or Arabs who rape the white blondes, people who live in the desert, but they have they're like millionaires, they're killers. We did not know that any of these people or characters in the films with backgrounds or stories or families, all we know that this person represents an Arab. So there are books and research that documented all this in a systematic manner, a strategic manner. The real bad Arabs movies, you speak about more than 900 movies only in the 20th century. After all these years, how would I explain as a journalist in a few lines, the opposite of this? So this is the result of years and years of a bad image or representation. As Michael said, there is laziness, but there is also a difficulty to switch the facts and to try to interpret all these stereotypes and patterns throughout the years that are not correct, and that what is taking place is genocide. You think that looks like you, but it's the opposite. So you can't see this in only, you can't say or mention this in only one article. There is a difference between the context and the dimension or the gap between the truth and the stereotype, to an extent that if I, as a journalist, want to cover a certain news, I'm a person who belongs, maybe I was born within this stereotyping process. I don't have the ability or maybe the journalistic ability in my limited time to change this pattern or this stereotyping. There is a scientific article in a journal that addresses the coverage of natural disasters, including earthquakes. They've done a mathematical equation. They want to see to what extent, if an earthquake, for example, happens or occurs in America or in Eastern Europe or in the Middle East, and they found that the life of one American equals 20 persons from the Middle East. This is just in terms of earthquakes. We're not talking politics. This is just a simple comparison or approach. I would add to Dr. Zahira's, now that the Western media don't know or not aware of the truth, or do they turn a blind eye, or they don't see it as we see it now? There is one thing I need to add. There are several newsrooms. Our journalists have made statements and appeals against the coverage of their media coverage outlets on the war, on the Gaza war. That's why I would say we cannot generalize, but the majority was a disappointment. Why is the research that was published in books in Britain or America speaking about the strong Israeli propaganda, media propaganda? A British journalist made a quick research, and a simple one, in the first 2 weeks of the events, particularly regarding, I don't know if those who live in the States or in Britain, if when you first open YouTube or click on YouTube, you would have an ad of very short reports about the atrocities, the war atrocities of October 7. Such ads, I mean, this British journalist, she concluded that the Hasbara, which is the ad agency, the Israeli ad agency, spent $720 million within 2 weeks on this propaganda. So you're basically, other than stereotyping that you are trying to enhance the idea that there is a group, a human group that was subjected to this kind of harassment or assault. In parallel, you don't see the same level of propaganda that says or that tells you that this does not justify the genocide. So I do agree with Yasmin about the stereotypes that serves as a background to all that we're seeing, but I don't want to put the blame on any side, but the Israeli propaganda, the money spent on this propaganda is huge. So there is a stereotype that and there is money to strengthen this. Michael, one more time, why does this happen, and how, after the last day or of the war, and we hope it's today, how would we go back to work as outlets, individuals, institutions? How would we go back to speak about everything that we learned in journalism ever since we graduated from schools or from the universities?
Yeah, that's a difficult question. And I think Zahara actually pointed at least to some hope here, in the sense that, of course, when you have, I think in the States, it's almost 1,000 journalists. You have BBC journalists, you have journalists from many Western outlets.
ABC.
Yeah, ABC. And you have people not only saying, hey, we can't cope with this anymore because it's so unethical and it's so one-sided and so forth. People are actually also even resigning, even for New York Times, resigning. People who've been editors for years and years and years. So I think there is an audience to talk to. You're not just talking in blind here, because there is, and this is against what I talked about, the street. That street is reflected also in newsroom. That street is reflected in university. That street is reflected in unions. So there is an audience, and I can assure you that I have never seen a level of kind of for lack of a better word, activism in my country. And I know it's there in Britain, it's everywhere. So there is a big pool of people to talk to, actually. And of course, every newsroom and every responsible editor will, when this does settle here, have to reflect, did we really do a good job? Did we really try to serve our professionalism and ethical, foundations and actually trying to get away with our inbuilt biases? We're all persons. And what I talked about before, but it's so extremely difficult if those who are covering on the ground actually is integrated part of one part of the conflict, i.e. the Israeli society, that they should cover it. And also it's so easy, nobody from the West could go to Gaza. You see, what they get and they have to rely on, they come to the ground, they rely on everything they have in the first place, and they don't have the ability to go to Gaza. So of course the Palestinians, until Palestinians and others started to actually humanize and make portraits that this is real people. They have families, they have ambitions, they have hopes, they hope to have a future. In the beginning, and I think also there is a change from the very beginning, in the first 2-3 weeks, down to now. There are more, and that is maybe not just because the newsroom are waking up, that is because there is so much resistance, and because they know that they are being threatened by social media and the street to actually try to wake up a little bit. And then the last thing I will say, and I didn't really go into it, but one of my colleagues before coming here tried to use AI to do a sentiment study on The Guardian and New York Times to see the bias. And it's clear there is a bias, but the bias is not, what I would expect. It's there, but in opinion pages. And so there is, even from the beginning, different voices within even the mainstream. But we see, because we also, I have to say that, we also come with a bias. You know, you hear the position here. So we expect real coverage. But for most people out there, 50% of the West don't know anything about the Middle East.
No.
They have no clue, no idea.
I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. But I think also the problem is we are seen with that bias, but the other is not.
Yes.
I think that's the problem. We all have biases, but we are judged on the basis that we are biased, and the other is not.
I fully agree with that as well.
طيب اسمحوا لنا بس فيما تبقى لدينا من وقت بالإمكان يعني أخذ بعض التساؤلات.
Let us take some questions. Wafa, you will be the first to answer. Wafa, let's take I just have one more statement to add. I wish to say that we have closed groups of journalists, female journalists. If I want to boost their morale, I would send them pictures of solidarity, of demonstration, solidarity action that is taking place in the Western world. Of course, this is important. And so that we can have a beam of hope, maybe. Once again, it's not to generalize, but what is happening, I believe the minute the Western media wants to look at us in the same way that they look at the white, I believe it only then that it would be different and there would be some change. But this will have to happen quickly, swiftly, because we don't have time for this genocide to continue. Yes, you're right. Hello, Leila Sheikhli from Al Jazeera channel. I would start with the comment that Ms. Huda said.
Direct my question to you, Michael. I thought it was very candid of you to express it was laziness or ignorance that was behind the fact that for many years, mainstream media in your country got by with what they did. However, that is fine and dandy when it's thousands of kilometers away, but when it's on your doorsteps, this is the question. And the question is, who is responsible? These 65,000 you said on one day that it reached, they went out because of social media? Okay, this social media, is it not capable also to expose this ignorance and laziness? And the question is, who will lead that into making this a new reality in Western media today? And also I want to ask السؤال الثاني
The other question is for Ms. Wafa. You expressed, you talked about the law institutions or human rights institutions. Throughout my 30 years of work in coverage, I have never seen any accusation against the human rights organizations across the world. As it happened compared to what happened this time, this war, this is very clear. It is almost that there is no coverage by any media, whether we're talking about whether it be the Western world or the Arab world. Who is responsible or to be held accountable, or who is responsible to carry out an awareness campaign in this field? Thank you so much for your presentations. So the first question, who would lead all the coverage that is taking place? If you can answer quickly. Michael, do you have an answer?
Sorry, I can't answer your question. I mean, it's impossible for me to answer the question. Who has the knowledge to do so? If I had that knowledge, I think it would have happened. But I can assure you, of course, the social media, the pressure from the street is having an impact. It is having an impact on politics. It's having an impact in the newsroom. And they know that different realities are being actually shown out there. And they know there is an audience for it. But I don't think they have the mental clarity yet as to how they will cope with it. Because again, it's a complete transformation. And I have to agree with that kind of colonial heritage that Yasmin was talking about, stemming all the way from the Hollywood films in the 20s, and Said covered it in Covering Islam, and that book could be read today with the same kind of relevance, you know?
Absolutely.
So that kind of colonial mindset, and then on top of that, put Palestine into the equation with the guilt in the West of the Holocaust. The whole Cold War, where the Palestinian liberation movement were on the wrong side of the Cold War. When Islamism emerged, again, the Palestinians on the wrong side of the history, so to speak, from a Western perspective, coupled with the whole notion of the other being the Arab, I mean, it's not something you change in one day. But I think this will create reflection, and there is that resistance coming from a different space, namely social media.
كان انا فيني بس جاوب
في
على
عجالة لو سمحتي دكتور.
بسرعه على موضوع
regarding the impact of the social media, regardless of what the social media does in terms of determining, maybe expanding or narrowing the content. There are two examples on how the social media impact that change or changing the news drafting regarding the events. They described the demonstrations, 300,000 demonstrators in London expressing solidarity with Palestine and asking for ceasefire. The BBC said pro-Hamas demonstration. This is how they described it. The social media imposed on the BBC to apologize and to correct its mistake. So they said that it was an unintentional mistake, and we understand how we can put it in a context other than the original or the true context. The other example is The Guardian. The Guardian was talking about the prisoner swap and said that this number of kids, children, and women would be released, and this certain number of people under 18, who are they? Are they children? They are children. In Britain, under 18 are considered children. And this was also due to the because of the social media, The Guardian had to correct this terminology. So we have children here and children there. If it weren't for this pressure, this thing would have never happened. So this is the role that the social media should play, should exert pressure on these media outlets. And before we finish, Wafa, there's a question about complicity and who should play this role to reveal these media outlets regarding complicity, the complicity of the international institutions. The Palestinian is between two fires. For example, in our internal dialogues and conversations, we used to the first party who complicited with the occupation was UNRWA. The withdrawal of UNRWA from its headquarters in the central of the Gaza city has allowed the occupation to go into Gaza, to invade Gaza. It gave maybe an intentional or unintentional signs for the people to relocate from the north to the south. If UNRWA insisted that they stay where they are, this would have never happened. I just want to
We are talking as journalists at the media as a Palestinian community. We talk about this complicity. Why are we talking between two fires? We are from the one side, we see that this complicity is very, very clear, or this is how it's justified from the other side. And that's my other point. From the other side, we don't have anybody other than those organizations. We want them to remain there. We want their support. We want them to do their job. And we are aware that of the pressures they're under, and this reminds me of another equation. And since we're talking, because the Western media wants to highlight our to show us as terrorists, meaning that we are banned to tell our humanitarian story. At the same time, they stereotype Gaza as it's that Gazans, when they are shot, they don't bleed. It's like we are humans. We need to be perceived as humans, not as superheroes or as we don't feel anything. Well, in between, we are between two fires, and when you talk about the roles of humanitarian organizations, I'm talking about holding accountable to those complicit individuals, organizations, and international organizations who have not done their duty and their job as should. Dr. Yasmin, and quickly, because sorry, we ran out of time. I would like to approach you all. You are storytellers. You are journalists. You can write in Arabic. write in French, write in English. Tell you the stories of people, of their families, of their dreams, of their heartbreaking stories, and investigate why. Why? That's a question that we're always asking, and we want to analyze, driven with evidence in the newsrooms. Thank you, Miss Dr. Yasmin Dabbous. Dr. Zahira Harb, Michael, and Dr. Wafa, thank you very much, and thanks for all the audience in this session. And sorry that we could not take more questions. We hope that we have answered many of those questions that you had in mind, and we ask you to participate in a bit in a workshop, workshops that would be presented in the Lotus Room, and you can check where this room is, where this workshop is. Thank you, and we hope you remain with us until we end this story with the closing ceremony of distributing the rewards of and awards of ARIJ. Thank you.